What's your reaction to what you're seeing unfolding here? As we say, a family who are believed to be Syrian, according to the RCMP, and they're crossing from the United States into Canada in the dead of winter in remote areas. What's your reaction to this?
Yeah, well, it's heartbreaking almost to see families being forced in a way to go through this. I understand there was a 3-year-old child involved in that particular family, so yeah, it's families in the dead of winter, not necessarily dressed for the weather, putting their lives at risk in order to get to Canada, in order to get to safety. So I would say it's not surprising, given what's going on south of the border, and I expect we're going to keep seeing more of it.
You say not surprising in part because you have your own legal practice, and you've been receiving a number of phone calls, people living in the U.S. currently wondering about coming to Canada.
Yeah, that's right. And it's, in some cases, I'm getting calls from people who have been in the U.S. a very long time. For example, I had a call from a U.S. citizen of Muslim origin who had been in the U.S. for many years with his family, doing very well, had a great job, but he called me to ask whether there were any options for him to come to Canada simply because he's feeling unwelcome, nervous, afraid, given everything that's going on right now.
Well, that's a citizen of the United States. We're seeing here, not only in this family this morning, but during the week along the Manitoba border, for example, we're seeing people who are in the U.S. right now crossing into Canada illegally, hoping to be accepted as a refugee in this country. What's the likelihood that these people can stay?
Right. Well, I think something that can be a little bit difficult is we keep talking about them coming across the border illegally. But once they arrive here on Canadian soil, they have a right under the Refugee Convention, of which Canada is a signatory, to make their refugee claim in Canada. So while they're crossing the border in an irregular way, once they're here, they have full legal rights to make an asylum claim. So it's always very fact dependent. So a family from Syria likely has a strong chance of success on a refugee claim. But it will always depend on a particular claimant's credibility, their particular circumstances.
And sorry for me to jump in here, Jacqueline, but what about the fact that they're coming from the U.S.? Does that complicate their case?
Well, I think what we're seeing is that a lot of people are entering irregularly because Canada and the U.S. have what's called the Safe Third Country Agreement. So to come to a land border crossing in a legal manner, unless you have some kind of existing tie to Canada, for example, a family connection in Canada, you're going to be refused the right to make an asylum claim if you do it in a legal way. And that's because the Safe Third Country Agreement, the premise behind that is that both Canada and the United States are safe countries, and that someone who lands in the U.S. should make their claim there as the first safe country where they've landed.
So let me jump in again. So are you then saying to actually take this dangerous route, to do it illegally, actually increases their chances of finding asylum in this country?
Well, the problem is that if they come to a legal border crossing, they'll be caught by the Safe Third Country Agreement unless one of these exemptions applies. So they'll be turned away. They'll be issued a removal order and turned back to the States. So for those who are desperate to get out of the States right now and to make their refugee claim in Canada, often the only way to do it is to cross in this irregular way, to do so illegally. And that's why I'm saying I think we're going to continue seeing more of this so long as the Safe Third Country Agreement is in place and so long as there's all this confusion around the U.S.'s respect for international refugee laws.
Well, you know, there is a call right now that third country agreement that you referred to should be dropped in light of what's happening, at the very least to ensure that people don't have to risk their lives as we're seeing right now. What do you make of dropping that agreement?
Yeah, I would agree that so long as Trump is calling for a suspension of the ability of people to make refugee claims, the basis for the Safe Third Country Agreement is gone. The entire premise is that the U.S. is a safe place to make a refugee claim, a country that respects international conventions, including the Refugee Convention and the Convention Against Torture. And if there's a suspension on the ability to make a refugee claim, the entire premise of that agreement is nil. So I think there's a solid legal basis for that challenge, and there's been calls for the government to repeal it. I can understand that there's resourcing issues around that. If we do repeal the Safe Third Country Agreement, we may start to see quite a large influx of people trying to enter Canada to make a refugee claim. So I understand that there's political issues that need to be thought out, but I do think that the legal basis for that challenge is sound.
Jacqueline, we're quickly running out of time here, but I do want to ask you, as we see this increase in number of illegal migrants coming to Canadian shores, Canadian borders, there will be people who think, well, it's time that Canada tightens up its borders as well. What do you say to those people that are concerned about the number of illegal crossings that we're now witnessing?
Well, the first thing I would say is that, we talk about an influx of illegal crossings. So far, my understanding is that it's not a massive number of people. So I do think, it's something that maybe we do need to put some extra resourcing towards, but it's not a massive influx that we can't deal with. I would also say that given what's going on in the U.S., I think Canada now has a duty to step up. Refugee numbers are at the highest they've ever been since World War II. There is a refugee crisis internationally, and with what is happening in the U.S., I think Canada should take the opportunity to step up and do more. We have the resources. We have an excellent system for security and background checks for potential immigrants and refugees in our country. I think we have the ability to accept more, and that's something we should be discussing right now.